Coming up on KCCI 8 News Close-Up, potential candidates on the fence. Former Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson back in Iowa with why he still hasn't announced whether he'll run for the White House.
And former Vice President Mike Pence, also in the Hawkeye State, still undecided if he will run. How the January 6th investigation could impact his decision.
And House and Senate Republicans in Iowa moved to restrict books and LGBTQ topics in schools. What parents, teachers, and activists told lawmakers before a crucial committee vote.
This is Iowa's news leader. This is KCCI 8 News Close Up.
And a good Sunday morning to you. Welcome to Close Up. I'm Chief Investigative Reporter James Stratton.
And I'm Chief Political Reporter Amanda Rooker. Thanks for joining us. Well, the 2024 Iowa Republican caucuses less than 1 year away, and several Republican candidates are already officially in the race.
But at least two other prominent Republicans may soon announce. Former Vice President Mike Pence, former Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson, both back in central Iowa last week.
And we caught up with Hutchinson and asked him why he hasn't made his decision yet. Governor, you've been mulling a presidential run for months. You told us that months ago. What's holding you back on making a decision?
Well, I realized that, we first looked at January, and I came here in January, and people said there's really not any hurry to get in. We want to get to know what the message is. We want to know the track record of conservatism. And now it has changed, and so the timetable has moved again, but it's up. And I've said very clearly that March is for messaging, March is for talking about the issues, April is for making a decision and the announcement. So there will be an announcement in April, so stay tuned for that decision. And April is right upon us, so we'll be back to Iowa, and we look forward to that announcement.
He's running for president. Does that have any influence on your decision?
No, it doesn't. We all presumed that Donald Trump would run for president. He's an announced candidate. He's holding rallies out there. And I've always felt strongly that the Republicans deserve to have alternatives. They need to have different messages and different leaders that's offered to America. And it should not be about past grievances, all the things that I've been hurt with, but it should be about the people of our country and the solutions that leaders offer. So I want to offer a very positive vision, an optimist view as to what America can be. And so it doesn't matter the fact that he's running. It does matter that we have other voices out there giving Iowans a choice in this election.
Do you think that in terms of youth engagement with having that lower name recognition, do you think that a youth engagement strategy is a potentially stronger or potentially alternative way to the presidency?
The youth vote is very important. And whenever you look at campaign workers, when you look at volunteers, but more importantly, they're the ones who've got to carry the future, and we want them engaged. And so it's up to a political leader to inspire the youth vote, to say this is the first opportunity you have to express your hope for America, and so be engaged. And so I like to meet with college students. I like to hear their message for the future, their concerns, and it is about what's the opportunity for me to have a job when I get out of college. What's the freedom going to be like that we enjoy now? Security issues. And so that's exciting to hear from them, but it's our duty to inspire them, motivate them, and get them involved.
Governor, fairly or unfairly, for you, if you get into the race, you're going to always have to deal with Trump questions, right? We're not used to having a former president run again. Can you talk about, so his rally over the weekend kind of connects with those people who, whether you want to say they support the attack on the Capitol a couple years ago or they at least don't condemn it. What do you say to those folks who seem to be lined up behind President Trump? Can you win those folks over, or at their core, do they feel like he got screwed in the election and it was worth the awful attack that we've viewed? It's a long-winded question, sorry, but to kind of get into the core of those folks, you talked about the grievance, but there's a segment of your caucus base that is not as repulsed by this as the general population is.
I think that's true. I think that, there's different views of January 6th. I've been very clear that January 6th was an attack on our democracy. It undermined the strength of America's democracy in the eyes of the world. And the people that were responsible for the attack ought to be held accountable. Now, within that context, there were people there on January 6th that shouldn't be prosecuted or might have a defense, and I don't like that it's drug on this long. Justice should be meted out, but it needs to be fair and it needs to be handled so that people are not spending excessive time in jail. So there's some side issues that are relevant to talk about here. But in the essence is, though, that we cannot whitewash January 6th. We cannot say it was not a significant event in our history or an embarrassment to our country, or that it didn't undermine our democracy, because it did. And so we have to be clear on that and unambiguous. Now, in terms, I was asked about that this morning, and I gave the same answer, and I think it resonates. I understand sometimes the process can seem unfair and be unfair, but that's why we have juries. That's why we have the due process requirements. And what President Trump is undergoing now, Americans undergo. And so it's really an eye-opening to what our criminal justice system is, the good parts of it, and things that we need to make sure we work on in the future. But clearly, I think that the Republicans, by and large, understand we have to move on from January 6th. We cannot live in that past. We have to look at problem solving for the future, and that's what I present, and that's what my message is.
The other question would be, sorry, it's almost a two-parter, but just looking at what happened in Nashville. And I'm sorry I don't know background enough if you had to deal with a school shooting as governor.
Well, let me address it this way, that I conducted a national study under the National School Shield Initiative after the Newtown shooting incident. And so I brought together former Secret Service agents, former federal law enforcement, educational experts, and reviewed not just locally, state by state, but nationally what we need to do to better protect our schools. Serious recommendations. We've made those changes in Arkansas, many of them, which are to improve the configuration of schools, to improve the security presence there and the access to school resource officers, but also to deal with the mental health issues in the school and the reporting and the response of those issues when they come about and are made known. Now, in the instance in Tennessee, this was a private school, and our heart goes out to the families and to the children that are impacted by this. We'll wait and know the facts, but we have to constantly continue to look at school safety and security as an issue, because every parent should have confidence that their children going to school will be safe.
Most of the commonality with these shootings are the ARs. Do we have to do anything with that? Do you support any change there?
I don't support additional restrictions on our citizens having firearms. Obviously, we need to look at every fact and every circumstance and learn from it, just as I did in our national study. And you will see that the best response is to have a law enforcement officer there or armed personnel that can respond very, very quickly. In terms of the school shootings, there are different means by which they've been carried out, but the answer is safety. The answer is response to the students, the mental health of the students, and to secure those schools.
And I'm sorry, just to clarify, are you saying that each school should have somebody armed, or are you just saying somebody needs to respond when something happens?
Well, my belief is that every school should have armed personnel. Ideally, it's a school resource officer, a trained law enforcement officer, but in Arkansas, we have allowed some of our rural schools to have training for the personnel there so that they can be able to respond in the event something happened.
Ahead on Close Up, former Vice President Mike Pence also in Iowa this past week, how he says the January 6th investigation could impact his decision on a run for the White House. Welcome back to Close Up. Former Vice President Mike Pence came back to Iowa the second time in 2 weeks, speaking at various GOP events.
And Pence told KCCI he'll make a decision later this spring on whether he's going to run for the White House. I asked how a federal judge's decision requiring Pence to testify in the January 6th investigation could impact his decision.
Open to your questions. Go ahead.
Mr. Vice President, grand jury, federal judge calling you to speak in front of it yesterday. Just general thoughts on it.
Well, I'm limited in what I can say about the grand jury's proceedings, but I am pleased that the judge recognized that the Constitution's speech and protection clause applies to my work as vice president when I was serving as president of the Senate on January 6th. We're currently talking to our counsel about the balance of that decision and determining the way forward, but I have nothing to hide. I've written and spoken extensively about that day and the days leading up to it. But for me, standing on that constitutional principle of the speech and debate clause, the protections, the separation of powers that's encompassed there, I thought was important. And again, I'm pleased that the federal judge recognized that constitutional protection applies to me as a vice president. But now we'll evaluate the best way forward and make our intentions known in the days ahead.
When are you going to decide on any possible appeal for that decision?
Well, as I said, I'll be in Washington, D.C. later this week, and I'll be meeting with my counsel at that time, and we'll review the judge's decision and we'll determine the best way forward. But again, I have nothing to hide. I believe we did our duty under the Constitution on January 6th, and I truly do believe that preserving the constitutional protections enshrined in the speech and debate clause was very important. And again, I'm pleased that the federal judge recognized and agreed with our argument that provision does apply to us. Reviewing how he sorted that out, but at the end of the day, we'll obey the law. But right now we're evaluating what the proper course is going forward.
Can you say what you've been asked to testify to?
Tom, I'm really limited in what I can speak about regarding the grand jury, but again, for me, the reason to challenge a subpoena of a vice president in their role as president of the Senate was an important constitutional argument to have, and now, for the first time ever, a federal court has recognized that those protections extend to a vice president. And for me, it's all about, as I said today here in Iowa, it's all about keeping faith with the Constitution. I believe the Constitution of the United States is the greatest charter of freedom in human history. But it's essential that we live under the Constitution. The stand that I took in the days leading up to it on January 6th was simply about about standing on the express language of the Constitution of the United States. I've always sought to do that in implementing a political philosophy of limited government, federalism, but in this case we thought this was an important case to make, and as I said, I'm pleased that the federal judge agreed with our argument that Constitution, speech and debate protections do apply to the Vice President when we're serving as President of the Senate.
Last question.
Other questions?
Does this have any impact on your thoughts about running for president?
No, not in the least. I'm incredibly encouraged as I travel around the country. Today, the dialogue here in Iowa, the response that we've gotten as we've traveled elsewhere around the country convinces me that the American people are ready for change. Change from the failed policies of the Biden administration, but also the American people long for leadership that will take us back to the policies of the Trump-Pence administration, but do so in a way that makes it possible for us to work even across the aisle to solve some of these large intractable problems. Whether it's the rise of China in the Asia Pacific, whether it's Russian invasion in Ukraine and the need to stand up a national defense that will meet the obligations of the 21st century, whether it's getting the economy moving again and tackling inflation, or dealing with a debt crisis facing our children and grandchildren, the likes of which the world has never seen, or whether it's defending our liberties, our values, parents' rights, and the right to life. I really do believe the American people long for leadership that will carry a conservative message on all of those things, but they want to see us return to a threshold of civility and respect that will make it possible for us to solve these problems facing future generations and facing the American people today.
Welcome back to Close Up. The second funnel week of the 2023 legislative session ended Friday.
And bills must pass either the full Senate or House and a full committee in the opposite chamber. Otherwise, they're dead for the rest of session. Now, one bill that House lawmakers amended and did pass through committee was Governor Reynolds' sweeping education bill. That plan would ban instruction on gender identity, sexual orientation in elementary schools. It would also put new restrictions on what books belong in classrooms and school libraries. Parents, educators, and activists got one last chance to speak out on that bill before it passed through committee.
This bill prohibits Iowa schools from processing books that include sex acts as described by Iowa Code 702.17. Also in the bill, written parental consent would be required before a school district could use a name or pronoun that differs from the child's birth certificate. Currently, under Iowa law, a child who has been identified as requiring special education cannot be educated under competent private instruction unless given approval by their AEA director. This bill gives the parents the authority to make the determination for their child.
We are registered opposed to this bill, not because we're opposed to transparency, but we're concerned with a number of provisions and how they would be implemented. First, I just want to say we are very supportive of teaching the concepts of civics, but having the high stakes exam to graduate is something that we believe is inappropriate.
This bill accomplishes so many things. It defines what age-appropriate material is not when provided by a school district. It prohibits the teaching of gender identity and sexual orientation for grades K through 6. It requires parents' permission before changing a child's pronouns or names while at school, and it doesn't allow a school district to withhold information from the family regarding a child's gender identity. These are all common sense things that should be happening anyways within our schools, but are not. Parents have proven this to our legislators by providing countless examples from our schools. Our children's innocence has to be protected and parental rights has to be honored.
I have been in many subcommittee hearings and I have given facts and data and pled with you about why this is just a horrible idea from a logical common sense perspective. So I'm just going to tell you right now what a suicidal 7-year-old looks like because she can't be her true self. It looks like a 7-year-old who's attempting to jump out of a car going down a highway because she can't be called she, her at school. It looks like a 7-year-old who is running out into traffic because that's the only way she knows how to kill herself. When you pass this bill, if you pass this bill, there is going to be even more children, even younger than her, having those feelings inside because their gender identity, the core of who they are, is being suppressed.
I am here today as a mother and a retired teacher. I support this bill. The passing of this bill ensures the historical purpose of education. As a teacher, parents were my customers. Reaching out to them was a vital part of their child's success. My guiding philosophy was founded on the belief and values that parents know their children best.
Any school district employee, in terms of the language, requiring any school district employee who reasonably believes gender identity being expressed is different than the student's biological sex is problematic. We're talking about janitors, cafeteria workers, paraeducators. They're not trained or have the correct tools to make that determination.
The purpose of education is not to teach kids what parents want. It is to teach them what society needs them to know. The client is not the parent, but the community. As Moms for Liberty, we reject that notion. It is only the school's responsibility to provide structure, to allow children to become responsible adults. Parents are not a threat, but a partner. It's time to eliminate the rhetoric of social movements and get back to the basics in education. Parents have a fundamental right in the upbringing of their children.
I know will for sure are going to be banned under this proposal. You can say they won't, but the language is plain. We have precedent around this, so I'm positive that they will. In fact, the tamest one on this list, Lord of the Flies, was banned in the Waterloo, Iowa School District in 1992 for being too sexually explicit. So, Lord of the Flies, Bridges of Madison County, Ayn Rand's The Fountainhead, George Orwell's 1984, The Canterbury Tales, The Great Gatsby, The Crucible, Brave New World, Dracula, The Scarlet Letter, A Picture of Dorian Gray, Sleepy Hollow, A Catcher in the Rye, A Clockwork Orange, almost everything from Ernest Hemingway, almost everything from James Joyce, the vast majority of Greek mythology, because Zeus alone, at some point or another, accomplishes nearly every act listed in 702.17.
I have some concern about the language used, parent and guardian, rather than member of the public or taxpayer. And the reason why is I'm not a parent, I'm not a guardian, but I'm the one that found the offensive books in my school district. So I'd like you to change that in the bill if you could, because if you don't, then you're actually going to be in violation of open records law, because it'd be preventing a portion of the taxpayers from accessing this information.
We're in opposition to this bill for a number of reasons. Just want to talk about one part of it, and that's Section 3 that requires students to pass a civics test in order to graduate. You know, that's another stakes test, as was mentioned by my colleagues. This time the stakes are for the student, though. It would prevent them from graduating if they aren't able to pass it. At a time when we're looking at reducing requirements in other bills.
Prohibiting classroom instruction developed for children discussing gender identity, sexual orientation, and human sexuality is harmful to students and undermines public health goals. It also contradicts decades of public health research about the importance of starting instruction on these topics early and preventing abuse, sexual violence, and promoting healthy relationships, positive self-esteem. We believe this bill is also contrary to shared goals of preventing violence and discrimination.
Close Up will be back coming up after this. Welcome back. One bill that did not pass Friday's final deadline, one that would limit when pipeline projects could use eminent domain.
Senate leadership decided they would not hold a hearing last week, making that bill likely dead for the rest of session. Now, if passed, it would have required a pipeline project to reach voluntary agreements with property owners to buy 90% of the land on the pipeline's proposed route before they were able to seek eminent domain to get access to the remaining 10%.
Well, thank you for joining us for this edition of KCCI 8 Close Up.
We will see you right back here next Sunday. Have a great day.